Welcome to our presentation, How to Double Your Multifamily Income with ADUs, which by the way is an acronym for Accessory Dwelling Units. My name is Seth Phillips, also known as Mr. ADU, and I really appreciate you all joining us today. I'm really looking forward to sharing all this information with you today. It's a lot to talk about and it's a lot to learn. So for everybody that stays all the way through our presentation today, when we get to the end, I'm going to offer you a very special gift that will blast you off onto your ADU journey. I can sum this whole webinar in one sentence. That's right, one sentence. You have the right to build 3 or more ADUs on your property, period. No planning department, no asking pretty please, no nothing. It's your right. Oh, that's right. Well, that doesn't mean anything if you don't act on it. So I'm going to explain to you how to do it, but it's up to you to make it happen. So let's get started right now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey, and there was a moment I remember I was standing in front of a property. It was an auction, and my partner and I had gone there to bid on this property, and like all smart people going to bid at an auction, we had set our absolute maximum price we would pay for that property, right? So the bidding starts. There's 10 people. It goes down to 5 people. It goes down to 3 people. We're one of them. And then it's down to 2 groups, us and one other group. And the other group has now bid our exact maximum number that we had previously agreed to be for our maximum what? We looked at each other. We didn't know what we were going to do next. I'll tell you more about that in a second. So this is one of the challenges to buying an ADU property, and what makes it a great ADU property? Well, in the example I just talked to you about, what we decided, of course, on the spot was to increase our bid. So we did. We won the auction, but as soon as it was done, I was like, oh my God, what are we gonna do now? Our whole model was based on buying this property, knocking it down, and then just building the biggest 2-story modern box on it, single family. But with the price that we had just paid for it, this model was in danger of not working. We could possibly even lose money. So, right about that same time was the first I'd heard about this new ADU concept. And I was immediately just fascinated by this. So I deep dived into it and I studied everything about ADUs. The more I studied, the more I came to believe this was going to be the future of real estate. So we completely switched gears. Instead of our plan to knock the house down and build a new 2-story single family home, instead, we kept the single family home, remodeled it, and in the backyard, built the first 2-story with rooftop deck luxury ADU in the city of Los Angeles. And my ADU career was born at that moment, and I've never looked back. So I'm going to share some of the tricks of the trade that we've learned along the way. So what is the opportunity? Well, the original California ADU laws went into effect January 1st, 2017. And that allowed for the first time single-family homeowners to be able to add a second living unit on their property, which could be used for income or for elder care or for a myriad of different uses. This was a truly groundbreaking legislative effort, and it's worked. And of course, the main driving force behind this new legislation is the fact that in California, we have a critical housing shortage. And out of everybody that looks at this issue, they all agree on one thing. The only way to solve this is to build more living units. It's very simple. But that's not easy as it sounds, because for instance, in any major city, you can build more units, but where are you gonna put them? There is no more vacant land. It's already all been built on. So the only way you can build more is to increase density. And to increase density, there are tools that governments have to make that happen. One of the things that they've always done in the past is they upzone a small area of the city to have higher and bigger apartment buildings in it, which does in fact, of course, create more housing, but there's two problems with that. First of all, the only people that directly financially benefit from that are the deep-pocketed developers that can afford to build these big giant skyscrapers. And also then it's just a certain part of the city that gets this higher density. So who gets picked to be the higher density? So it's not the fairest way. The ADU concept is brilliant in this regard because it spreads that density out across the entire city, which is the fairest way of doing it. Also, financially, it now benefits any property owner that wants to be able to take advantage of building their own ADU, which is also the fairest way to do it. So, as government programs go, this is actually really brilliant stuff. And unfortunately, California is real trendsetters in these kind of new developments, but this one they did not originate. The first place that I learned about in the United States for ADUs was in Portland, Oregon. And Oregon has become a very progressive state. But that's not the first place. The first place I've been able to find was actually in Vancouver, Canada, where they started those over 8 years ago. They're called laneway homes because that's what they call alleys. And many of these new structures are in the back of the house and in the United States also on alleys. So that's a little history on ADUs. And now they are allowed in California. So that's the single family part. But today we're going to be talking about primarily the multifamily application of this. This is the new stuff. This went into effect January 1st, 2020. So this now also allows multifamily property owners to be able to add ADUs to their property today. And there's two different ways that they can do this. First of all, any multifamily property owner now has a basically by right ability to add 2 new ADUs to their property, which can be new construction ground up or conversion of some existing space. That's great. But in addition to that, so on top of that, there's another part of it they can also take advantage of, and that's called the 25% conversion rule. That now allows property owners to be able to add more units to their property, and that's based on their existing unit count now. So if you have a 4-unit building, you can add 25% more units. Well, 25% of 4 is 1 unit. The really cool part about this part of the law is there's no limit. So if you have a 100-unit apartment building, you could actually add 25 new conversion units, plus your 2 by right ones. So your 100-unit turns into a 127-unit property. You can probably imagine what that does to your cash flow. It's just amazing. Now, there are a couple caveats to that. First of all, it can only be the conversion of existing non-living space. Some examples of that would be like a rec room, a storage room, a boiler room, something like that. And that's a great opportunity, but there's a very limited amount of space that actually qualifies under that definition. But there's more, because that also includes the conversion of garages. That's right, or carports. Now, in most cities, this is also limited to attached structures, not detached, but we're working on that one and we might be able to get that changed. So in my example where I said the 100-unit apartment building, if that had tuck under parking or attached garages, those garages could be converted into 80 units under the conversion rule. So in the process of doing that, you're actually eliminating existing parking. You do not have to replace that. You're going to be converting that to a new living unit. You do not have to create parking for that either, provided your property is within 1/2 mile of a mass transit stop. But that includes a bus stop. Well, if you look, almost every city, almost every property is within a 1/2 mile of a bus stop. So that means almost every property qualifies for this exemption. So this is where really is the gold and ADU gold, where you can add just potentially unlimited new units to your property. This is an example of one of our actual projects. And this is a multifamily operator, and this specific property is just north of downtown Los Angeles in one of these up-and-coming hipster areas. And their business plan is pretty simple. In the past, they've bought old, run-down properties, they buy them, they completely remodel them and reconfigure them to turn like big, giant 2-bedroom units into 3-bedroom units with more bathrooms. And so they're increasing the rental value by going through that process, and they've done that very successfully. They own over 80 properties. This is one that they purchased recently, and they're already doing the rehab on that front structure. But in the back, this is the way that we analyze a property, because the 2 units that you can build by right, basically you have almost no restrictions on that. You have 4-foot setbacks on the back and the side, but basically if you can fit it, you can build it. So when we're analyzing a property, using this as an example, if you look in the back, there's a nice big open area. If you look at the highlighted part, you can actually see there is a 1-story garage there, but we're just knocking that down because we can convert that into an ADU. So what the plan is for this property is they're going to build 2 side-by-side units in the back, which they will rent out for a very hefty amount of money. So this property is a perfect candidate for it. And you can make a boatload of money doing ADUs, and you want to know why? This is very simple. Because you get an opportunity now to build an income-producing property on free land. That's right, it's free land because you already own it. So it doesn't go into the equation of the profitability of it at all. You already own it. So when you're figuring out your ROI on this, you only have to consider 2 factors: how much it costs to build and how much you can rent it for. And from that basis, it is always going to be a home run. You could build the worst ADU you could imagine. It's still going to make money. But we're here to talk about how to maximize your income potential from these. So once again, looking at this example, we're now looking at some drawings of it, the floor plan and the elevations, and you can see that each one of these units is now going to be 3-bedroom, 3-bath. So they're maximizing the rental value of that space. Even though it's not that large, it's still, every room is big enough and will generate a massive return for its size. So we're going to be talking about now a very, very simple rule that you can use to analyze the return on any investment rental property. And it's called the 1% rule. Now, this is a very, very common rule pretty much anywhere in the country or even the world. You probably haven't heard it that much in California because it doesn't apply here, because it's too good of a return. And the dirt here costs too much money, which skews the return because you're paying so much to buy the property itself, the dirt it sits on. But the 1% rule is very simple. If your monthly income equals 1% or less of the total cost of the property, then it's going to return an amazing return. That's going to be a 12% return on investment gross. So 1% a month. And this property is a perfect example of that because each one of these units will rent for $3,000 a month, and each unit will cost $300,000 to build. So that's exactly 1%. So that will deliver a 12% ROI. Now, you know this, you're in the business. If you're out there trying to buy an apartment building right now in Los Angeles, if you could find a really good one that had a great ROI, that would be somewhere in maybe the 5% range. That's it. With this, we're talking about 12%. That's how big the difference is when you take the land out of the equation. Also, when you look at this from a value creation standpoint, and if we were going to use the GRM, and for this area, for instance, a B+, A- building would have a gross rent multiplier of about 11.5%. And with this kind of rent, that would convert to a value for each unit of $414,000, and that unit costs $300,000 to build. So you're starting in with over $100,000 of net new equity, plus a property that's spinning off a return of 12%. This is gold, and that's what we do. So people ask me all the time, well, what's the best ADU to build? Well, it sounds complicated, but it really is more about what is your intention in building it. If your intention in building it is to generate the most maximum cash flow, then the answer is very simple. Build the biggest thing you can build. The bigger it is, the more equity you generate. The bigger it is, the more rent you generate, and thus the higher your return is going to be. So bigger is better when it comes to cash flow. Now, on the other side of that, if you're just looking to get the very best return on investment, then it's a little bit different. Possibly it's almost the exact opposite. The actual smallest unit will actually potentially deliver the biggest ROI. The cost will be less to build it, but the rent versus the cost will actually be a slightly higher formula. So it's all really about what is the intent of building it. And then of course you might not be building it for rental purposes at all. You might be building it to house elderly parents or adult children, or there's many other uses that could be for it where that wouldn't necessarily be the correct metric. But in general, bigger is better. Remember that. Well, thank you very much. That concludes our first video in the series. So I hope that we see you on the next one where you'll learn even more. Thanks.